You need to be doing something that isn't 2x better or 3x better. You need to be doing something that's 10x better. You need to be solving something that isn't the number 5 thing on that buyer's list of things to do in the next year. You need to be solving the thing that's number 1 or number 2 on that list. The market goes through these large disruptive shifts where the existing world, operates one way, and then after this shift, the world operates completely differently. You can build large category companies on the backside of that disruption because the whole stack gets redone. The security, the infrastructure, the application, and you can build whole new multi-billion-dollar companies on the backsides of those. So our investing thesis is about trying to find those moments in time and those companies that have found the technology changes that lead to that big market disruption.
In this episode of Next Unicorn Podcast, I talk with Lars Leckie, a longtime venture capital investor in Silicon Valley, specializing in enterprise software startups. Lars is a managing director at Aspenwood Ventures, which has been rebranded from Hummer Winblad Venture Partners, a longtime venture capital firm in Silicon Valley. Hummer Winblad was started in 1989 as the very first venture capital firm specializing exclusively in software investments. Today, that's the norm, but back then it was unique since venture capital firms largely focused on hardware investments. From the start, the firm's very first fund was incredibly successful, and the firm had an over 30-year run before the founding partners retired and the firm was rebranded to Aspenwood Ventures. In this interview, we talk about the Aspenwood Ventures approach to investing as the first institutional money in the next great enterprise software companies. We also talk about what Lars thinks are some of the most intriguing opportunities for AI startups. Then Lars tells us about how he evaluates startups, how he finds impressive early-stage founders, and lessons he's learned about how to be a great venture capital investor. Later in the interview, we discuss Lars's personal career background. Also, stick around to the end because Lars participates in the Next Unicorn bonus round. Lars, tell us a little about Aspenwood Ventures and what makes it unique among venture capital firms and among venture capital firms that specialize in enterprise software.
Sure. So Aspenwood is exactly that. It is a firm that has its roots back to the origins of the software industry. So Aspenwood Ventures grew out of a firm called Hummer Winblad Venture Partners that Steve and I were both a part of in prior times. That firm was the very first group to say, here's this software world, here's this venture capital world, let's put those two things together. So back in 1989, Ann and John had the insight to do that and think that the software category was going to be big. They started Hummer Winblad. It had a fantastic run, 30 plus years. Steve and I formed Aspenwood out of the history and roots and background of that Hummer Winblad profile. And we largely do the same kind of investing that we did back then. And so we're just building on sort of long history, long expertise, lots of time in the enterprise software world, focus on that category.
So your firm really pioneered this enterprise software specialization as a venture capital firm, it sounds like.
The Hummer Winblad platform certainly did. And in fact, it's almost crazy the stories they have from when they were getting started. It took them 3 years to raise their first fund because literally limited partners were like, I don't think this software thing's real. You have to go back in time and realize that back then venture capital was about hardware, semiconductors, chips, interesting things that were happening in the technology around that. And software had this mindset of like, well, the problem is that your employees go home every day. If they don't come to work, you don't have a company, like crazy things that you would never think of in the discussion today. But Hummer Winblad had the insight to say there's a business model there. And I mean, their first 15 investments had some crazy number of IPOs and positive outcomes. I mean, one of the best performing venture funds in history.
Can you just, since you specialize in enterprise software, can you just briefly define what is the definition of enterprise software? And is that term interchangeable with like B2B SaaS, enterprise SaaS, B2B software? Do all those terms mean the same thing? Or what do you actually mean specifically by enterprise software?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. I think that the latter ones SaaS, and so those are subsectors of enterprise software in sort of the way we look at it. So I'll start broad. What we do is software only, so no hardware. And then we only do what I call the boring side of software. So that's the enterprise side. So that means we cross off anything that has hardware in it, but then we cross off anything that goes direct to consumers. So we only do the non-consumer side of software. And so that now we're in the realm of, okay, so that's enterprise software as we see it. And that can be application software, infrastructure software, security software. You're up and down the stack across whatever builds software that sells into banks, insurance companies, big tech companies so the buyers and consumers of your product and your service are those customer set. I think a lot of the enterprise SaaS, that is the application side of software, but there's the whole infrastructure side that wouldn't address. And so we tend to look at it by who are the buyers of that software, how do they buy it, and then lastly, the piece that's sort of critical to our investing model and what we think is about building great companies is you can also look at the economics of the business model. So a good enterprise software company, if you sort of look up and down, even in the SaaS era, you're looking at 70-80% gross margins. So there's an inherent capital efficiency tied to the way these businesses can be built and can be funded and can be, successful on capital. Companies might raise a lot of money, but the core business model has that capital efficiency, that high gross margin piece. And so I always joke, if we could find a more capital efficient category to invest in, we'd probably go do that. It just turns out that right now and for the past 30 plus 40 years, the most capital efficient business model has turned out to be investing in enterprise software with that gross margin. So sort of two sides of how we look at that.
So when you say enterprise software versus like B2B software or SaaS in general, is there a difference? And are we talking about like software for really large companies and software that specifically, because of the business model, has these really high gross margins, or is it just sort of like indicative of the larger category in general?
So I think both. We look at who is the customer. So are they big enterprises, right? So global 2000 type companies, those are amazing. Then there's the sort of mid-market, and then there's sort of even what the smaller companies, SMB type companies, but they are companies that are buying your software, not as, in contrast, a consumer software, a fintech, right? So fintech where they're selling directly to your consumer. So you have to have direct to consumer marketing. You need to go out and find individuals to buy your software. So that's sort of where we cut that line off. Sometimes they're mid-market, sometimes they're SMB, sometimes they're enterprise. Any of those customer sets, in our opinion, in our definition, are fair game. The question you asked about enterprise SaaS, that's an application tier question, right? So is it an application that people are buying from you, or is it an infrastructure? So if you look in our history, we've been wildly successful with companies like Omniture and MuleSoft. These are selling into the infrastructure. People are building applications around and on top of those things. Those are not SaaS applications in the way a lot of people think of SaaS applications. SaaS applications are things where, like, I need to solve this problem in marketing, and you go in and here's a software package, and you're getting to an application online and you're solving a pain point. Could be, very interesting pain point. CRM is an example of that. But in contrast, on the infrastructure side, MuleSoft is deep in the glue, integration. It's something that no end consumer would ever see. And so that's sort of the infrastructure side of software, databases and all those sorts of things.
I mean, MuleSoft, you mentioned that was an incredibly successful investment. I think you guys invested Series A and sold it to Salesforce for like $6.5 billion.
Well, you're cutting us a bit short. We wrote the very first check. So it was two founders, the canonical two founders, a dog and idea. I don't think they even had a dog. In fact, at the time, the company had a successful-ish open source project, and they had the misfortune of actually somehow harpooning a whale. One of the large Wall Street banks had said, "Hey, we're already using your open source. We need this. We'd like to sign up for an enterprise version of this product." And the two founders, sort of looking at each other like, "We don't have one of those." And literally, they got through the requirement documents to the point where it's like, "What's your 24-hour support line?" And I think they were rock, paper, scissors, like, whose cell phone do they put down? And so we literally joined the company at that time to help them build out enough that they could sell to this customer that wanted them. And then, the great run. That company, about a 10-year run, which is typical for an enterprise software company, but they IPO'd and then they were bought $6.8 billion by Salesforce. So if you want a description of what types of things that Aspenwood does, we try to do exactly that over and over and over again.
Maybe you could give us some more examples of some of the other great companies you've invested in and some of the kinds of companies you're looking at recently.
I mentioned a couple. So MuleSoft was one. Five9 was a company. That's a company in the call center, hosted call center space. So that was a company that the traditional world of the call center world was one in which it was all on-premise software. And, much in the era of, they were the very first, they were the person who first said, we can deliver this functionality as a SaaS offering. We were the first money into that company. We wrote I think it's a $2.7 million check or something like that when they're fairly young. That company, went on to have an IPO that during a tougher time of the market. But I think they peaked at a $14 billion valuation as a public company. I think they're still trading, I'd have to check, $6 billion or something now. So fabulous run. That's a typical kind of investment for us where what we're looking for is companies. So our whole investing thesis is around the idea that, well, first off, enterprise software as a category is one of the only categories that it grows 10% every year. Sometimes it's 9%, sometimes it's 11%, but it's this category that literally for 40 years has been growing at sort of 10%. It is a rising tide. Even if you're involved in a company that's just doing okay, you're going to get this growth in the market. That's just sort of part of the enterprise software world. Additionally to that, we believe that the market goes through these large disruptive shifts where the existing world, operates one way, and then after this shift, the world operates completely differently. So if you really go back in the Hummer Winblad history, people were mainframes going to client server. Now that's dating the technology stack. The Salesforce era, the Five9 era, that was the on-premise software moving to software as a service. It was called ASP. It was called all sorts of things as we made that transition. Now it's called cloud. But that, you had, in the Salesforce case, you had all these on-premise CRM providers, and Salesforce comes out and the incumbents ignore it. They pretend like it doesn't exist. They sell 10 seats. Nobody wants that. It's a toy. It's all this stuff. And so you have these big disruptions where you can build large category companies on the backside of that disruption because the whole stack gets redone. The security, the infrastructure, the application, and you can build whole new multi-billion-dollar companies on the backsides of those. So our investing thesis is about trying to find those moments in time and those companies that have found the technology changes that lead to that big market disruption. And so that's the thesis, and that's sort of how we've been investing. That's why Hummer Winblad and Aspenwood have had this sort of success we've had, is because we kind of continue to focus on those disruptions that continue to happen in the market.
So are those disruptions because of a new technology that allows for a new type of business model and then resulting change in customer behavior, or what are those inflection points?
That's our belief. So these things come through. The disruptions themselves can be business model, they can be what have you, but what we believe is important is leading up to those, there are technology changes that then enabled that disruption. And so that's how you can sort of, if you pay attention to it and you dig in and you find founders who are deep in these worlds, you can find those signals of the technology that's leading, to that change that you can invest into.
Obviously, I want to talk about AI a little later in the interview, but are you really bullish on AI being the current disruption that's going to cause a lot of opportunity, or causing a lot of opportunity for new enterprise software startups?
AI is certainly changing the landscape very quickly. I think it's going to be important in almost every category of enterprise software at some level. I think it's going to be both fast and furious and slow and plodding all at the same time. So I can try, maybe I can peel that back a little bit. So we are certainly in a hype cycle that for AI that has, this is what the software world goes through. We have these, Gartner talks about it, but we go through these things where things pop up and become super, and then reality sets in, and then we sort of, you look back and you're like, oh, look, that trend was happening for a while. So that's the long, slow piece of AI. And then, of course, we're in the middle of, a level of excitement about AI that probably is not sustainable, but it's certainly driving the innovation. I break the AI world up into two categories, maybe broadly. There's what's happening in the application side, and then there's what's happening on the infrastructure side. So on the application side, this is probably where we're engaged the most. AI is a new way of interacting with your users. It's a new way of interacting with the data that brings it up. So almost every one of our companies that's involved is doing something. They're, okay, how are we going to take AI? How are we going to take LLM data? How are we going to put new data in? How are we going to provide insights to our customers that can make their lives better, faster, higher ROI? And so I think every one of our companies is playing with that, launching products, developing. Now, there are some people who their entire business model is gone. I think maybe an easy example is the guys in sort of educational software that had some sort of cool thing that people liked. And it just turns out if you have an LLM, you can type it in. And so those companies are, their whole business model is done. I don't think that's the norm. I think most of the companies, we're talking about a refresh on user interface. We're talking about a refresh on ROI. Great things, driving lots of stuff. Now, by the way, we haven't figured out the cost side of that yet. Right now it's trending to free, but I don't, given the amount of infrastructure spend in there, we're always asking people, hey, this is great. You've described how AI is going to change your product. How many times a month can your customer use that before you go bankrupt? Like, how, have you thought through that economics? And so we're still in the early innings of figuring that out. And in a world where people are giving it away for free, you can build these products for a while, but in 5 years, how does that translate to a business model? We're still, I think we just don't know how it's going to play out yet. So we're bullish on the application side. I'm bullish on, the idea that you, me, anyone can turn into a developer of sorts because you can use AI to help you build code and write code and get started. That's what drives the enterprise software world to have this 10% year-over-year growth. We're just going to see more people who are programming, more people who are interacting with systems. That's the opportunity set. So I'm very bullish on that. On the infrastructure side of the market, where, by the way, tons of money is going. Some venture firms are writing enormous checks into these companies. So let's go back to the disruptive model. One of the things that I described in the disruptive model is that you have these incumbents who are in the disruptive model, who aren't supposed to believe in the disruption, right? They're supposed to ignore it. They're supposed to say it's a toy, not useful for enterprise, name all the things. Well, the incumbents here are fairly powerful people, as is always the case, but it's Google, Amazon, Microsoft. By the way, these are people who have been developing AI, doing this for a long time. And by the way, they also happen to have this thing called scale-out data centers already built out, already in place, and so on. So the question you have to ask on the infrastructure side is, do we follow the traditional disruptive cycle here? Or is this one of these categories where the incumbents slowly get up to speed and ultimately end up winning? I would say that I in this particular case, I would bet on the incumbents. And so there's a lot, we're doing less on that side because of that dynamic. I think you're going to see, and you've already seen Amazon launching competitors to, they may have even invested in these companies and they're now launching products to compete with them. So I think we're going to see some fireworks over the next few years as, some of these companies struggle to find cost structures that work.
I guess since we're already on the topic of AI, maybe we can go a little deeper on this now. I mean, obviously, as you alluded to, the big tech giants are kind of dominating the LLM, large language model space in AI. But do you see any opportunities right now for sort of small, early stage startups in AI? And if so, what kind of opportunities do you think those are?
So to divide into the two worlds that I see, I think there's lots of opportunities on the application side of AI, remaking categories, remaking the interface, relooking at data and bringing things up for customers. I think that's a fabulous place. I think that's where we're seeing a lot of excitement. That we're seeing a ton of companies presenting, coming in and talking about that. Here's what you could do traditionally. Here's what you can do with AI. This is why we can win. We have access to the data. Those are very interesting companies. On the infrastructure side, I think it's going to be increasingly hard. I mean, to win on the infrastructure side, you probably need hundreds of millions of dollars to buy out infrastructure and so on, and run at a loss for years. Google proved that you can do that, but Google had this amazing thing of advertising revenue that let them do anything. So I haven't yet seen anybody who has this disruptive technology where they can give it away for free because they have that revenue model tied to the back end like Google does. So on the infrastructure side, is there opportunity for small companies? Maybe. I'm a little less bullish on that at this point, because if Amazon says, we love this company, we're investing alongside you, that doesn't mean they don't plan to kill it in 2 years.
Can you tell us a little about the kind of AI startups in the application area that you're looking at recently for potential investment and you think are interesting as kind of examples of types of use cases and business models that would be good for early stage startups in AI?
You're being a straight man here. I'm allowed to talk about one of our companies and see if people get excited about it, but sure. So we have a company that is in the video AI space. Their premise, their thesis is that enterprises, companies have increasing large numbers of customer interviews, product interviews, just name it, but it's all in video. And the one thing a marketing team has almost no access to is the ability to go in and say, can you find me a customer who said they were excited about our feature set in healthcare, blah, blah, blah. And so what Vidoso is doing is they're saying, okay, we're going to sit and we're going to ingest all your video assets. We're going to use AI to identify those video clips. And so then you can literally go in and type in customer healthcare space, this kind of ROI, give me a video that I can send to this customer that talks about that. And tomorrow I'm going to say, give me an education customer who does this, who likes this feature set. And so instead of marketing having to go out and redo all those videos or find people to do that, they can use all their existing assets pre-clipped, pre-ready to go. And that's the type of thing you couldn't do historically. So we got pretty excited about, and by the way, this company, they have a long history of doing AI and video with one of the self-driving car companies. So, they've built this before. They understand the scale. They understand how to do it.
So it's sort of in-video search function. I guess there's also similar companies doing like AI tools for searching within very large documents and such, and populating documents. What are some of the other examples of other applications that work well for this kind of?
I mean, I think you're going to see a lot in the marketing space. You're going to see a lot in the, I guess one other piece that we haven't seen a lot of yet is there's, if you recall, when I was talking about the this, when you have a new category, you have the opportunity to do new security software, you have new integration software, you have new management software, plus the application layer. And so I think we are still going to see, we're hearing this from a lot of our companies where you're like, okay, CEO says, we're going to do something in AI. We're a marketing company. We're going to do something, we need to integrate with some LLMs. We need to integrate with some data. And right now that is in the raw. Engineers go down and code to this LLM, try it and say, well, it doesn't really work for our use case. Let's try this LLM, code it. So there's a whole infrastructure tier that I think is still pretty interesting, where we don't know, this is like back in the day where you had 10 database options and you don't really want to build to one database. So you build to, an infrastructure tier that lets you swap out the databases and so on. So you can sort of imagine there's still an infrastructure play here to make sure AI safety is good, make sure AI data is good, make sure AI security is good, make sure you're using the right LLM to deliver the right cost per performance. So some of the AI technology works really well on video and some don't. And so you need to be able to try those things and swap them in and so we're still excited. We're looking for investments that help enable. That's sort of the brick and mortar pieces that will go into the future of these AI platforms.
Are there any other examples you want to mention besides this interesting video search tool that sort of give people idea of the sort of range of applications that could be successful using AI?
Yeah. So we have a company called Clue based up in Vancouver, Jason Smith's company. They are a competitive intelligence platform. So they help customers. What I always say is they help when a salesperson walks in the room, they know exactly where their competitors sit. So they don't stick their foot in their mouth and say something about what a competitor does. I mean, in the sales process, it's all about trust and being able to, the customer looks at you and says, I believe this person is a good long-term partner with me. If you start off by not knowing who your competitors are and saying things that aren't true, and they literally just talk to your competitors, and instantly that trust is gone and you can't move forward. So Jason wisely has figured out that all of that competitive intelligence data lives inside you've got various enterprise systems that has it in there, plus all the stuff out in the wild. And so this is a great place for taking AI and being able to pull that data together and surface it up to people and say, here's what we have found about your competitors. Do you want to add that to your battle card? Do you believe that to be true? And then have someone curate that so that when your sales guy gets that data, it's the most current, it's the most accurate that it can be. So, completely changes the way they build all the data that goes into their product.
So I think many people would consider enterprise software to be kind of the bread and butter of Silicon Valley venture capital. And, when Hummer Winblad, the earlier branded iteration of your firm, started investing, it was probably a much more wide open space. And since then has become a much more saturated and competitive environment. And as we discussed, maybe AI will create some opportunities in the disruption caused by AI. But how have you had to change the way you think about startups and how to invest in successful enterprise software companies as this space has become more saturated? And what's the sort of evolving strategy in that new climate?
Yeah, I mean, the software market is a bit of a chess game, and then the venture market is also a bit of a chess game. And so as a firm, we have to navigate those things. I may give you a very boring answer to that, which is the investing model we do today is the exact same investing model that Hummer Winblad did in Fund One. We have been, it's interesting when you say that enterprise software has become crowded, because I sort of laugh. When I got in this business, I literally had people tell me, I don't think you need to do consumer software, right? There was the era of like Facebook and all this stuff, and like enterprise software is done and dead. No one cares about it. And so it was sort of, for a long time, I mean, that was sort of table stakes. And I think we went through the SaaS wave where everybody was funding small projects to do, features. That era has passed and we're sort of back to the core bread and butter enterprise software world. Look, there's always going to be people who invest in this that we have to think about. Most of our LPs are successful enterprise software people. So the founders of Zendesk, the founders of MuleSoft, the founders of Five9, the founders of Okta, Salesforce people, DocuSign people. We built this back end of super successful, high quality people who have actually seen this playbook. They've built companies in this era. And so that's one of the things we bring to the table, is not only the history of the Hummer Winblad, but also this sort of large group of people that can help our companies and help us move forward. The current state of the enterprise software market on the venture side is sort of interesting. We, as people raise bigger and bigger funds, people who we used to co-invest with are now one or two, they've raised funds that are multi-billion-dollar funds. So they're not writing $2 $5 million checks into enterprise software companies. If we have competition in that, it's people like our LPs. So we invest. So as the funds got bigger and people went later, we actually stayed where we are and sort of actually moved a little bit earlier. And there's still a ton of opportunity. If you're willing to invest in two founders, a dog, an idea, and roll up your sleeves and do the necessary work to go from idea to product to early revenue, there's just not that many people who are willing to do that, and especially do it the way we do it, which is a high commitment model. We're going to be the lead investor in your round. We're not writing a $100K check alongside 20 other people and wishing you the best of luck. We're on the field fighting with you. So, one of the ways we've navigated, so Hummer Winblad early funds were all, they wrote a $2 million check. They took a board seat. They had good ownership. We're writing a $3 million check today. We're having good ownership. We're on the board. The model hasn't shifted as much as you'd think. So one of the best things that we've done is to stay the same, to focus on what matters, to focus on the capital efficiency as the market has shifted and changed.
So would you say your sweet spot is seed stage, first check in?
I would describe what we do as first institutional financing. You used the term seed. I'm recoiling from that just a tiny little bit, because when you say seed, some people think, oh, Lars writes 50K checks every week into companies and what have you. That's not, we do what I sort of refer to as an old school, boring, investing model, where we're writing meaningful checks. We're only investing in 5-6 companies a year, sort of opinionated, curated approach to that model. So the companies would be described as seed stage companies, two founders, a dog, an idea, early product, early revenue. That's the boundary of where we invest. But our investing model is not a seed investing model, I don't know if that's too technical of an answer, but that's how we approach it. Yeah.
And then you stick around for follow-on financing, I assume, for some later rounds.
We are typically, we'll be your lead investor in your first round. We'll be an active investor in your next 1 or 2 rounds. As companies become worth hundreds of millions of dollars or higher, we by design aren't really, we need partners who have bigger checkbooks than us to step up.
Let's talk a little bit more about some of the most successful companies that you've invested in your career, and what you think made those companies really successful compared to the ones that didn't work out as well. What have you learned over time in your career about what really makes those companies successful?
Great question. When I first got in the business, I actually asked John Hummer, founder of Hummer, but I actually sort of asked him that question, like, how do we know? We get in so early, and there's so many variables that can play out. Like, how do you know if you've got a company that's going to go on to be a fund returner, to be an impactful company, over the year, create an era and live through that era and win? And his answer was one which is both John Hummer in simplicity, but also just reflects on kind of what's important. And he thought about it for a bit, and what he came back with is, do they raise their next round successfully? And okay, that sounds pretty obvious, but hidden inside that is, when you're looking at an investment, you need to think about this company is we're going to provide it some capital, but they're going to need capital afterwards, and then there's follow-on financings. And so you're looking at the team, you're looking at the market opportunity, you're looking at the product, and you're trying to convince yourself that, this isn't it's a great team, but a terrible product. These are the questions people ask. You're like, no, you have to believe it's a great team. You have to believe it's a great product. You have to believe it's a market. And what we talk about is a market that can actually get to what we described as the S1, so the IPO filing. Can you imagine what the IPO filing of this company would be? Now, that used to mean you could get to 100 million in revenue. Let's pretend that we still use that, because if we can get a company to that sort of scale, whether it goes public or gets acquired, you're going to have it's appropriate. So we spend a lot of time thinking about, as you're making that first investment, could you imagine the pitch you're going to make to that next investor? And could you imagine how the team looks to those people, how the product looks to those people, and how the market opportunity looks to those folks, so that you're investing in companies that have that potential where the story will evolve. And by the way, you have to make sure the companies do this, but can evolve to the metrics and direction that next investor wants to see. So what does that mean? That means you're very careful not to end up in companies where they'll get to 10, 20 million in revenue, but they run out of space in their category. You're looking for teams that, starting these companies is incredibly hard. Well, actually, starting it is a leap of faith. The growing it is the hard part, right? When we talk about teams, these people are, you need to, if you're the CEO, founder, what have you, you need to convince, sort of step back and say, what's your daily job? First thing you got to do is you got to go convince people to join your company, which, by the way, is like, 3 people, a dog, an idea, nothing really there. Maybe not, maybe you have a little bit of funding, but, you don't have hundreds of millions of dollars, so you got to go convince people to come and join your company when it makes 0 sense to do that, right? Like, I'm happily working at name big tech company. Why on earth would I join you? And so the first thing founders have to do is go convince a bunch of people that this is a great idea. You should go tell your spouse or whoever, I'm going to quit this other job and I'm going to go do this insane thing. And so that's the first, that's one of the things that founders have to do. That's hard. The next thing is you got to go convince customers to say, hey, you've got some piece of your infrastructure. We got the best thing here. And they're like, I'm sorry, who are you? Wait, there's 4 of you. Why would I can't, where's my 24-hour support line? Like, I can't buy that. I'll get fired if this doesn't work. And so founders then have to figure out how to get customers to make that leap. And then, the last piece is you got to go convince people to invest in your business when, again, it makes 0 sense to wait, you're 4 people and you've got 2 customers. Like, how do you know you're going to be 100 customers? So the job of the founder is to walk through walls when everyone tells you can't do it, to have this sort of piece of that. And so we're looking for founders who we can see that pattern of success. We see that sort of passion. We see the drive. And by the way, like, they could have been successful in something else, but you can see they know how to make something successful. And so I'm not sure I answered your question, but that's at least part of it for us.
There's a couple things I want to unpack there. First, the idea that the sort of first litmus test for a company being able to proceed successfully is being able to raise the next round. I think, and that's certainly obviously the case. We often hear in venture capital that the best investors are contrarian but right, in order to capture that alpha. But on the other hand, like you alluded to, you have to enough other people have to agree with you soon enough that they can finance some of the next larger rounds. So you can't be too contrarian, or the market has to catch up with you soon enough that you avoid this sort of financing risk. That when you're evaluating a company, there is this how big is the financing risk? Will other people agree with this soon enough?
Yeah, I think the classic to the benchmark had Andy Radcliffe had one, which is the 2x2 matrix. You have to be, there's consensus, non-consensus, right and wrong. And so the successful investments in venture under that framework is you need to be non-consensus and right. And I think the what you're pointing to is there is a third element to that, which is not addressed there, which is in the right time frame, right? So you can be non-consensus. You believe in something other people don't believe. You get in early, and then you can be right. But it doesn't matter if you are right on a timescale that doesn't match your fund, the company's life cycle or your fund's life cycle or so on. So to give you an example, you fund a company, non-consensus, great, setting up great. Turns out you're right, it really works, but it's 5 years out. There's probably going to be you're probably going to die, and there'll be another company that shows up that takes advantage of that. And so they were non-consensus right and had the timing right. And by the way, this is one of the things I love about enterprise software in this realm. Capital efficiency gets you 2 or 3 at bats on timing. So if done right, you spend your money, you build your product, you get out, you engage customers. If you don't step on the gas on sales and marketing and blow up your burn, you have the ability to sort of play out timing through a couple innings to see if you're right, because they're just your cost is headcount at that point. And if you can start to get revenue come in, you can sort of prove the market, use that revenue. If you can get $1 million in revenue, you get $800K in gross margin. You can use that to sort of buy yourself the time to see the next card in the market. And enterprise software, that is one of the magical things about enterprise software, is that if you build them right, you have that, you'll get 2 or 3 at bats before the market plays. And so that's an important
So if you have enough revenue, early revenue is important in this enterprise software game.
Getting early revenue and keeping your costs constrained until you get the market feedback that the timing is right.
Got it. So that extends your runway in order for the market timing to catch up with your new concept and prove you right. Hopefully, prove you right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to think of the analogy of sort of the Billy Bean kind of analytics. Okay, well, we've got a young company, it's got a great product, we get it to market, and if you play it all in, if you go an all-in black strategy, you say, okay, great, we got the team, we got the product, let's build like crazy, and then let's start marketing it and see what happens. Once you step on that, let's see what happens piece, you'll hire 2 or 3 sales guys, and your costs will go up, and then you have a fairly short window, 6 months, a year, to be right on the market timing. What's nice is if you can do that, where you get in, you build the product, and you get those first few customers, that early revenue can buy you 2 years, 3. You can buy a longer window to be right, and so that's part of how at least we view building enterprise software companies.
Got it. The other thing I want to unpack there is that, just like it may be hard to convince the next round of investors if you have a really forward-thinking concept, like you mentioned, you're dealing in enterprise software, you're dealing with really big companies, and ideally you're trying to get these lighthouse customers that are really big name brands, especially early on, I imagine. And like you mentioned, those are, the people in those roles that you're trying to convince are very risk-averse people trying to run a really stable organization. How do you convince them of your new concept, and what works for getting those kind of customers on board with a really early stage startup, given the challenges you mentioned?
I mean, to use the disruptive framework, you need to be doing something that isn't 2x better or 3x better. You need to be doing something that's 10x better. You need to be solving something that isn't the number 5 thing on that buyer's list of things to do in the next year. You need to be solving the thing that's number 1 or number 2 on that list. Because if you're number 3 or number 4, they'll sort of say, yeah, it's interesting. Maybe we'll try that next year. Maybe we'll try it later. Like, you need to have that compelling event, and you need the founder to be able to go in and speak to that compelling event such that people are like, look, I got to do something here. I don't know what it is. Sounds like you've got an answer to get me, through the door. I need to do this, if you enable a business model they couldn't do otherwise, and they're like, we just got to get there because otherwise everyone else is going to do this business model and we're not. You need to have those kind of compelling type value props for people. If all you're doing is we'll save you 20% or 30% or we'll get you there, people just don't jump for those kinds of things.
So when you're looking for companies and founders that have discovered a sort of 10x value proposition, how do you find those, and how have those founders generally stumbled upon finding that golden goose of an idea that is so needed by these big companies and delivers that kind of 10x improvement? How do you find that?
I looked through our founders a couple of years ago, and I asked, what sets our founders apart from other people? How do we, let's just look at who they are, what they do. And although we funded some people, we funded a 19-year-old guy who was building a new category thing. So we definitely, 18, I think maybe at the time, we've definitely gone early and young. The most surprising thing that came out for us was that the average enterprise software founder that we're dealing with was 42 years old. And why is that? In large part, to your question, in order to disrupt this world, you kind of have to have lived in this world. So you have to have lived the pain. I was at XYZ company. We were trying to solve this big data problem, this AI problem, this engineering management problem. And I beat my head against the wall for 5 years. I tried to convince my boss to do it. You kind of list all the stories. And then, a classic example was we built a product that is fabulous, works really well for us internally. I think this can work at, the next 100 customers. And so then people are spinning at, but they've lived in that world. They've lived the pain. Ideally, maybe they've already built a solution that sort of solves the pain point, and they're going to come out and build version 2 of that for everybody. That takes time. That usually takes a tour of duty or what have you somewhere, and understanding, what the market is doing and where that pain point is. So, yeah.
And how do you go about finding the best founders who fit that category to potentially invest in?
That's the hidden superhero or superpower, right? Where do we find so a lot of people come through the network we have. So that is people who know our existing founders, our former founders, CEOs, and or are the investors in our fund. That if you sort of take those 3 categories of people, that would represent probably 75% of the companies we look at on a regular basis. The other thing that Steve and I do is we try to spend our time in places where other people don't. So we go to the conferences on how do you scale your back-end infrastructure, like places where the sort of engineering discussion is happening on the next set of technologies. And so we try to spend a lot of time in those places and get to meet the people who are thinking about what big disruption could come next in the tech stack to solve a pain point that they probably are trying to solve today.
Do you think it'd be worth maybe just giving us a better idea of like a mental market map of enterprise software, the enterprise software space, and just like how you conceptualize of this and what kind of subcategories or buckets you would put your potential investments in?
So broadly, enterprise software, there's application, there's infrastructure, but then we have security development tools, management tools. So when we approach the market, so what areas of just take an application. I'm going to run this application. Well, where's that application going to run? It's going to run in an environment, maybe AWS, maybe on-premise. How are we going to monitor it? How are we going to secure it? How are we going to do user authentication? So you can kind of imagine, just for that one application, all the 6 or 7 layers of that stack that have to exist for that application to be successful. And so the way I think about enterprise software is, let's find all those different places, right? If we build an application, we have to secure it. Okay, so there's security software. If we build an application, we have to be able to monitor it. Okay, well, so monitoring, the whole world of site reliability engineering as an example of one. So we have a new way, hyperscale world. Well, none of the management software that worked in an on-premise world works in a hyperscaler world. And so, okay, so now there's a new category of enterprise software that can play. And so our approach to that is like, if you believe that these changes are happening, what has to happen to all the various other categories of software to enable that application to be delivered that way to those customers with this kind of performance? And so that's really how we look at it. I will say we tend to look, if you look across what we do, it tends to be, I mean, we'll do applications and infrastructure. We tend to do things that are infrastructure-like, even in the application side. Omniture, MuleSoft, these would be infrastructure type pieces. And the definition of those tends to be that they have broad applicability. So I'm contrasting that, for instance, to verticalized software. Okay, I have something that solves a problem in the healthcare space. That is always going to be an application-centric offering, right? And you better be right that what you do matters to that category, because that's the only category you live in if it works for healthcare. In contrast, I'll give you an example. We have a company that is a billing company. Sounds pretty boring. They provide billing for recurring revenue models, so SaaS models or any sort of recurring usage-based models. Well, that is a trend. If you believe that SaaS on the delivery model of software was going to change, that billing software has to change. So if you used to you buy an iPhone, you pay for the iPhone, and then your relationship with that is done. But when you buy your Apple data plan, hey, you need to check your usage and bill you monthly. And so most software, most billing software, most finance software is not set up to do that sort of long-term relationship. Oh, your credit card declined. How do you figure that out? So we have a company, Aria Systems, that is going after that category. But let me tell you that category is important in tech, the tech vertical. That category is important in the telco vertical. It's important in the media vertical, as we, all the paywalls and so you can kind of go down and look at all the different places, all the different verticals where this software. Now, the software will have to be customized to address all their needs, but you're selling the same basic software across many verticals. So that's where we tend to spend more of our time. We get excited about those, but yeah.
Is there anything else you want to say about kind of the types of enterprise software you're looking to invest in the next few years? Or are you even, I should have maybe asked you, are you really thesis driven in that regard, or are you more just sort of opportunistically open to what founders come to you with?
So the answer is yes, yes, and yes. And by the way, the founders are the core of all this. So people who live in the world, we talked earlier about our belief that there's a disruptive model to the enterprise software market. And so our investing thesis is about those disruptions. So we believe firmly that technology leads to big market disruptions. That leads to opportunity. So everything we do is around that. So if that's a thesis-driven model, that's certainly what we do. But we're not hey, I'm the smartest guy on the planet. I'm going to see this next disruption that happens in 2 years. What I'm telling you is I know there will be a disruption in 2 years. Now let's go figure out what it is. And and the reason why Hummer Winblad was successful for 30 plus years is they weren't like the best SaaS investors, although they were one of the best SaaS investors. That was just one step along the journey of disruptions. And we believe they're going to continue to come back to back, over time. So then that's our approach. But then what you have to do is you have to go out and engage with these founders, because they are truly the people who are living this problem. They are truly the people who are trying to believe. So what we try to do is engage as many of those people as we can, listen to what they say, and then reinterpret it into our view of sort of the way the software model works. And so for us, for an investment to happen, it's usually this wonderful meeting of those two things. A founder who sees that, who describes it, and they might not even describe it in the terms that we do. It's then we synthesize that and say, yeah, we think that is one of these disruptions. That is the technology that's going to lead to that. And that's usually what leads to an investment from us.
So given that you are on a daily basis, out there talking to founders and figuring out what different founders' view of the current and future disruptions are and how that's impacting opportunities for new businesses. What is sort of your vision for how the next successful enterprise software companies will evolve, and sort of what's your vision for how this opportunity and a new time of disruption will play out?
Again, I'm not trying to be the smartest guy on what that next disruption will be. I believe founders will see that, and it's our job to try to surface that. And a recent example for us, we just invested in a company called Ethica, which is doing data privacy at scale as a data as code. And so if you believe, like we do, that the world, we are making a trade-off of privacy versus, convenience maybe, and that the world has run way ahead on the convenience piece and not so much on the privacy piece. And that's, we're trying to, that needs to come back. That is a trend that we fully believe is happening, and finding a company that is going to put the privacy piece back in that was very exciting to us. It is absolutely going to change the market going forward. And they've managed to convince the New York Times and all Twitter and all these people that in fact that it is time to focus on that.
What have you learned over your career about what you think makes a great venture capital investor?
Luckily, I think there are a lot of different models to answer that. I mean, I think the founder focus and making it about the founders, making it about their success, enabling them to find that success, to me, that is the piece that keeps the innovation cycle, keeps the excitement level high. That to me is probably the piece that has driven over time. I try not to be the smartest person in the room on the product. I mean, if you look at our founders, many of them have PhDs in computer science. So what can I do is I can enable those people to do the best thing that they can do. And that to me is the most fundamental piece of, as I've gone through this, I'm actually not trying to see around the corner on the market. I'm not trying to be a better product guy than the founder. None of those things work. What really works is enabling the founders to go after those things.
Great. On that note, is there anything else before we move on to some personal questions on the bonus round? Is there anything else you'd like to say about the future of enterprise software or AI in enterprise software, or how other enterprise software founders can contact you?
Oh, well, then let me take the last one. Hopefully, if I'm doing my job right, I'm relatively easy to get a hold of. That we want to have as many first meetings with founders as we possibly can. That's part of our, if you're going to listen to the market, you're going to listen to founders. We got to talk to a lot of founders. So if you can't find me on LinkedIn or Facebook, LinkedIn or our website or wherever, I'm not doing my job right. So hopefully, hit me up on LinkedIn, whatever it takes to get in my inbox. I'm more than happy to have a first conversation with almost anyone, as long as you're software, as long as you're enterprise facing. Please reach out.
Great, sounds good. Is there anything else you want to say on the sort of future of enterprise software and AI, or anything else before we move on?
Well, maybe I'll say one thing. If you look at, I actually just did a slide for our investors, which is, people are like, oh, enterprise software has gone down in the last 2 years. It's, there's a lot of headwinds, and, there's sort of this dynamic. I like to say, if you look at the 40-year history here, so we've had that, I've talked about the growth. Hey, so enterprise software is just sort of 10% better every year. But by the way, if you look over that period of time, the average software multiple outcome was something like 6 to 7x multiple. And the average interest rate was probably in the 5 or 6% rate. So if you're a capital efficient early stage person like me, sure, there's some slowdowns the last couple of years, but if you look at today, the opportunity to start a company today that can be, a MuleSoft, a Five9, a Amber Data, an Aspire IQ, companies that can take and own and win categories. We're in a multiple market. We're in a interest rate environment market, which is the same as the last 40 years. So I just encourage people to like pull back and look at those things and say, I think we're going to have interest rates that are probably around where they are today, plus or minus. We're going to have, and software multiples, great companies are going to trade at 7 times. Fabulous companies are going to trade at 10, 12 times, and stupendously great companies are going to trade at 15, 18, 20 times, and that's the environment we're in now. So this is actually, it's a fabulous time. It's a time where you can go out and engage customers and sell them and build revenue and build businesses. We're through all the dynamics of that sort of getting comfortable with where interest rates are, getting comfortable with where software multiples are. I think that's all, rearview mirror stuff. And we're in the normal period. We're not in an abnormal period.
All right, great. Let's move on and just have a few personal questions. Tell me just a little about your personal career background and how you got to where you are today.
So I grew up in Canada. Went to a place called Queen's University. I had the fortune of going to school with someone who was already coming down to the Valley in the summer and working actually for Microsoft and Elon. And so upon graduating, I first thing I did was like, I'm gonna move to the Valley. So this was mid-90s. I'm gonna move to the Valley. So I came down, did so engineering physics background, came down and did my master's in engineering at Stanford. That was my how to step down and get into the Valley. Of course, it was the 90s in the Valley. So very quickly it was spin out with the group out of Stanford, start a company, build that. We were actually doing self-driving vehicles in the mid 90s. So one would argue maybe 20 years ahead of our time on that one. Now, we weren't doing cars. We were doing construction equipment and agricultural equipment. So did a couple other small companies, and then went back to Stanford. I had the realization, which has sort of maybe led me to where I am, having built a business that scaled to 7,500 million in revenue that had hardware. I had learned that hardware's hard. If you double your business, you more than double your capital needs, right? And so it was this constant need for more capital, just to fund the inventory to then fund the growth. And you certainly can't grow 5 times a year because it would just blow up your capital requirements and the planning thereof. So I had come to the realization through building a business the hard way, through the internet downtime and all that in 2001, that I wanted to be in the software world. So I went back, got an MBA at Stanford, and had the fortune of running into John Hummer, who was also a Stanford graduate, business school graduate. And he basically convinced me that if I wanted to get into software, the first thing I should do is come work for him. Convenient for him, of course. I had actually had a pretty bad experience with our venture investors. They turned down offers that would have been fabulous outcomes. And anyway, so I had a relatively negative view of the VC space. So when I agreed to work with John, and now this might date me a little bit, if you know The Princess Bride, there's the line in there, which is, "Good night, Wesley, I'll probably kill you in the morning." That was my joke with John Hummer. It's like, "Hey, good night, John. I'm probably going to quit tomorrow. This isn't for me." And he just wisely kept being like, "Sure, okay, whatever you want." And I was using this model of my investing thesis was, would I join this company? Like, that was my mindset, was I'm going to do another company. When I meet these founders, would I want to work with them? Would I want to go do what they're excited about doing? So, we talked earlier about like how hard it is to be that founder and like convince people to join and all that. I was doing that analysis, but for myself, because I was saying, is this interesting? Why would I invest in this company if I wouldn't join it? And so that has long been my, the guiding light for me, is like, don't just put money in. Would you be willing to be a third co-founder in this business? And that actually simplifies a lot of things. Anyway, that went on for a number of years, and then I feel like a blink of an eye, and then one day John Hummer said, "Hey, I'm going to retire, and you're now a venture capitalist, and you need to take over this firm." That was a surprising event for me, because I had no intention of being on this side of the table for this long, or what have you.
It sounds like that itself was a surprise or unexpected. Was there anything else that sticks out to you as like really unexpected about your career path?
I mean, growing up in rural Canada, I never would have thought I would be, here doing the tech stuff. I mean, it's just not, the people I had. You look around where I grew up was, it was doctors, dentists, lawyers who were, that was the role model, not technology people. So I look, the guy named Mike Serbinis he was already connected to the Valley back then. So I look at that as one of those surprises. If I hadn't had that connection, there's no way I would have sort of made the jump to the Valley. So I think that, meeting John Hummer, and then somehow sticking with it enough to end up in the seat where I am. I would say it was not a concentrate. It was not I woke up one morning and said, I want to be a venture capitalist. That all the decisions I made just slowly random walked me to the position I'm in now. And I, like good fortune, having luck along the way certainly helps.
Let's move on to the bonus round. Are you ready?
Okay, let's have it.
What really drives and motivates you?
So one part of my background I didn't give you was that for a while I was on the Canadian sailing team. So I tried to go to the Olympics twice. So that was a long pursuit of an athletic endeavor, living in vans in Europe, trying to compete. And so there was a famous guy in the sailing world who one time told me, the thing about because being a good athlete is about winning 51% of the time, right? So everything you do, you're going to make a ton of mistakes and so on. And by the way, that's true in life. It's true in venture investing. It's true, And so there is this, he put this concept in, which is like, why do I keep doing it? And this guy had won world championships, he's very successful. And like, why did he get up every day to keep racing and keep doing all this stuff? And his answer is, I'm looking for the perfect race. I'm looking for that race that I start and I understand what's going on. I make the right decisions against the wind and the competitors. And at the end of the race, I'm like, I was in the right place, made all the right decisions, that's his idea. And like that pursuit of the perfect race is probably unachievable. I think in the venture world and the startup world, that's what I'm looking for, the perfect investment. I'm looking for the perfect opportunity, one of which, we saw it, we got excited about it, we worked with the team, we made all the right decisions, it turned into a category leader, it drove, that'll all mean wild success for the founders, it'll mean wild success for our investors, but it's that pursuit of how do you find a company, an opportunity, a problem to work on that is the perfect solution. And I think that is a lifelong pursuit in this business.
What really excites and inspires you?
So interesting on the venture side, what we don't get to do is the operating side. And so we live vicariously through the founders and their successes and their achievements. I mean, one of the jokes in the venture world is like a good venture career has sort of a good outcome or a good meaningful point of success, maybe every 3 years, 5 years. It is an extremely long game. And a good venture career might have 10 of those days, right? It's very different than the sort of operating being. And so I think what I find inspiration from, what I find motivating, it's the living and being a part of those successes that the founders and the operators of our businesses have, and sort of getting the energy out of their successes is sort of, I mean, to me, that's inspirational. These people are doing really hard things, and when it works, it's life-changing for them and for the category they're creating.
What's something about you that most people wouldn't expect?
I'm in the Space Technology Hall of Fame. How's that one?
What? How?
Well, in my prior life, when we were operating company, we made a GPS system that did a bunch of things, and so the guy who created the GPS system was the reason I went to Stanford. He was a guy who he was a professor there, and so I got involved in some projects that then ended up turning into something which got us me and the other founders of that company. We all got inducted to the Space Technology Hall of Fame.
Wow.
Yeah. I don't think that's going to help me in any way, but there you go.
Do you hold a view on something that most people don't agree with you about?
I feel like that is a constant struggle for me. That is your non-consensus and right comment. I think if you live in the world of doing early investing, you have to almost seek out non-consensus positions on things. And so I feel like that is a constant battle with myself and with the people around me to that you can end up hopping from idea to idea without getting some of the people be like, that's just not going to happen. You're like, yeah, but if you don't think about what could be, actually, Anne Winblad was always about this. When you're making an investment, it's really easy to find all the things wrong with something. What's really hard is to find what's right. To have the mindset of like, what if these things go right? If someone describes everything, you're like, it's not going to work because of that. Call it a fatal flaw or something. And you're like, yeah, but what if that is right? And if that's right and we can get through that, what happens? And so I think then you end up living in this. I mean, I'm not talking about did Americans really land on the moon type controversies, but I feel like you're constantly sort of taking the non-consensus side of a lot of these sort of places. So, yeah.
What's some advice you would give your younger self?
Me and my friends joke about this. One of the advice you get when you talk to successful people is that you should have more work-life balance. And the joke is, great. Did you have work-life balance that led you to where you are? Because that's advice for you at your stage in your life, right? Like when you're at a point where you've made a bunch of money, you've had success, you've got wins on the board, whatever your metric is. Sure, you can tell other people they should have more work-life balance, but if that's not how you got there, then advice to my former self. I think the trusting in other people is probably the thing over my career. So I think there was a belief that you can be the smartest person in the room, you can get something done, and learning over time to work with and for and as part of a team. I probably had a long walk to get to that one from where my early career was to where I view it today. To the comment on work-life balance, I don't know if that's a comment that my younger self would have listened to anyway. So, yeah.
So you're saying just the younger self should continue to be intense and work in just prioritizing what you're working on.
Oh no. So the piece of like really finding a team of people you trust, being willing to trust them, being willing to, give them the pieces, like there are people who can help you along this journey. For whatever reason, my background, I had a strong belief that the only person who was going to help me was myself. And I had to get out there and, you can't count on other people. You got to you work harder than people, work smarter than people, all those things. That was my mantra. And I think I probably could have used a notch or two below that, and really learn to trust the people around me more.
Oh, I see. It's sort of like a balancing thing. Like you can actually not be quite as intense, but more prioritize learning to work with a team of great people
and trusting that other people, you surround yourself with people who kind of scare you, as opposed to, and then enable them and trust them to do the things that they're going to do, and you do the best of what you do, but building that in the team environment, I think is, to me, that's one of those things that took me a little while to find out.
What do you think was the key to learning to work with a great team in a way that gives an exponential result that's more than just the sum of its parts? And I guess that must take finding a really great team of like-minded, talented people.
Yeah, and just putting yourself in situations that increasingly get you up to that uncomfortable place where you go from, early life. You can get into a mode where the early life is about trying to be the best at, if I use, I'll use a sailing analogy. So when we were sailing, we were the best locally We became the best provincially. We became the best in the country. And we kind of walked away from all that and said, let's go join a team in Texas because they're the best in the world. And so continuing to put yourself into places that I mean, I think kids experience this all the time. You're the smartest person in your high school, and you go to college, and what they did was they took all the smartest people from all the places and they put you in a class. So you're no longer at the top. Well, you don't know if you're at the top. But you've taken the top group and you've gone horizontal. And so continuing to find a place where you are putting yourself into that position where you're getting alongside people who are really good at what they do, and continue to push yourself to find that, but don't do it as an individual. Do it and embrace the people around you is the piece that I would have told myself to do.
When you're gone from this earth, what would you like to be remembered for?
Being a great cyclist, being a great dad, great, hopefully all the things that add something to the world, and hopefully along the way, having found the perfect investment, the perfect race, the perfect what have you. I hope that's it.
Great. Well, Lars, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate it. It's been a great conversation.
Thank you for the time and the opportunity. Enjoyed the chat.